The CoinWeek Podcast is brought to you by PCGS. Visit Booth 104 this weekend to take advantage of their exclusive 2023 Central States Numismatic Society special label. The special label is available for all coins dropped off at the PCGS booth for grading at the show. To learn more, visit PCGS.com. This week on the CoinWeek Podcast, we talked to Aaron Berk and Mike Nottlemann about their great Ancient Coin podcast. On their podcast, Aaron teaches Mike, a numismatist trained on American coinage, how to collect ancient coins. It's a journey for both of them, and we talk about the process next on the CoinWeek Podcast. Aaron and Mike, thank you so much for joining me on the CoinWeek Podcast. It is a real pleasure, actually, not only to have you on, but to see the growth of the great Ancient Coin podcast that you guys are doing. I have to admit, I don't much listen to U.S. coin podcasts. I check in and dabble on occasion, but I'm not really what I would call a listener or a reader of other people's work product, and only because I like to read it like when there's like some time between when they published it and when I get to it, because I don't want to really influence my own work. But you know, like with Coin World, for instance, was a competitor of CoinWeek's. I have in my garage every Coin World from probably 1971 to 2018, and I go through the back issues because I'm always amazed about how good it is. But I go through the back issues because there's some historical distance. With what you guys are doing with your podcast, it's certainly an area I want to learn more about. It's not something I regularly write about, but for the last couple of years, we've been promoting more ancient coin content. And as the editor of the site, it's been an enormous learning curve to go from, new useless guy to, having a basic familiarity of many of the concepts, but still feeling like there's just a mountain of information that I don't know. And this is, in some respects, the program you guys are doing is you're taking somebody who is savvy about coins, active in coin collecting, and introducing them to something new. And in some respects, I imagine there's some element of your own childhood, Aaron, in this, because you and your sister grew up with your dad, who's like this icon in the ancient coin market in the United States. I'm sure you went to coin shows before you wanted to, and then you went to coin shows because you wanted to, and you just were exposed to all of this. But to share that with somebody else has to be just a really thrilling experience. So I just wanted to have you guys on, tell you first of all how good a job you're doing, and then also just kind of get your take on what this whole experience and this journey has been like.
Yeah, to answer your question about growing up in the coin business, I guess I didn't realize my dad was famous at all. He was just dad. But I think my first ANA, I'm told I was in a baby carrier under the table. So that was my first ANA experience. Of course, I don't remember, but I'm sure a coin maybe fell into my basket, at the time. So, but yeah, my sister and I grew up going to the office in Joliet, Illinois, which is where we were at the time, and putting stamps on catalogs and helping with closings and doing all kinds of fun stuff like that. So and occasionally attributing a coin. So but it definitely an interesting life growing up as far as that goes. And I think I can speak for my sister that we're both really proud to have our father and to still, because he's still going strong at 80, but also to follow in his footsteps and actually make our own pushes in the industry and making our mark. And I think both of us have done that. And so I feel very fortunate, humbled, and also proud to have done what we've done so far.
And how about you, Mike? What's this journey been like for you?
Well, it originally sounded like you were describing me when you were talking about, somebody a little savvy about coins, but not really knowing much about it. Because truthfully, what you see with me is what you get. I really knew nothing about them going into it. And I looked forward to the opportunity to, learn from two of the all-time greats. And when you have opportunities like that, you really need to jump on them.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say one thing. I met Aaron. I'm relatively new to the industry. I've only been working in coins for like 10, 12 years maybe, which seems like a long time, but it's not. And I remember meeting Aaron. I think it was pretty much Aaron when you're definitely had already come into your own, starting to be one of the leading faces of Harlan J. Berk Limited. And I was just so impressed. Not only to see somebody kind of in my own age cohort, like running a major deal, but just knowing you, like you said, knowing your sister, I mean, it's just amazing amount of talent that exists beyond the coin thing. And I feel like either of you would have been successful whatever you decided to do. It just happens that you decided to do coins. And I also, just right, maybe for our viewers to kind of understand this, it seems like this is not an indictment against US coin collecting and the market that exists, but you can sell a US coin fairly easily. If you have a nice coin, it's in the right holder, has the right grade on it, you got the right price for it, you can probably sell it without being a rare coin expert. In fact, I can tell you from experience, I know people who are not rare coin experts who have convinced rich people to buy multi-million-dollar coins.
True.
So it doesn't take any special expertise to do that. Now, the better U.S. coin dealers have a lot of business acumen, they have a lot of salesmanship ability, but they typically also know a lot about coins, at least in that area. But you're talking about a period of like 230 plus years of American coins.
Right.
You're talking about a handful of mints. Maybe if you're really adventurous, like someone like John Kralovich or someone like that, all of the Americana angles. So you're knowing metals, tokens, and all that kind of material.
Right.
Ancient coin dealer, you have thousands of years, tens of thousands of coins, like all sorts of civilizations that have come and gone. You have various qualities of pieces, depending if they were pulled out of the ground 9 days ago, or if they've been in historic collections for a period of time. Those historic collections are spread to the four corners of the earth. The literature written about them is in all sorts of different languages. The coins themselves are written in different languages. I mean, it is a monumentally different thing. And we've become so specialized, I think, in the American coin market, we fail to grasp the fact that the major coin collectors in the beginning of the century, they were collecting ancient coins and U.S. coins.
Right.
So it has to be just an absolute testimony to how much work you've had to put into this to become a ancient coin expert.
There's a ton of osmosis that goes into this, and you really need to have a lot of time that goes into it over, I've been doing this now 31 years, and I started in antiquities. Just to give a little background, when I came to work for my dad, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Nobody's doing antiquities, do that." And okay. And so I jumped into that, which actually gave me an advantage in coins, I think, because once you develop a good artistic eye for antiquities, then that helps develop your eye for coins. Because when I look at an ancient coin, I try to look at it artistically like it's an antiquity, and it is an antiquity. But I don't look at it like some coin collectors and dealers might look at it. I look at it does this look like a Greek or Roman statue? In the way the iconography has been cut, how the die has been cut. And so there's a lot that goes into that. And especially when you're evaluating coins for collectors in auction or buying for stock for the company to sell, or when clients come to me and say, is this a good die? You really have to have that experience and know-how. And so antiquities did help me do that. I did that for the first 10 years, and I've done that for my whole 30-year career. And then I moved into ancient coins probably 20 years ago. And even though I was around it my whole life. And so it takes a good 15, 20 years before it really starts to stick and becomes easy. And so, but even today, my dad will see things that he's never seen before in his over 60 years of doing this. And he says that's what keeps him passionate about doing what we do, because we always see things that we've never seen before. An auction comes out, and we're like, God, I didn't even know that die existed. And so, that can keep you interested and passionate about what we do for a long time.
It's funny you say that, Aaron. One of our ancient coin writers, Mike Markowitz, I'm sure you know who he is. I remember I was at the New York show with him 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 2 years before COVID. And we walk up to your dad's table, and I'm filming a segment, and Mike's going to talk to your dad about something. And your dad has a coin. He's kind of telling a story, and then Mike turns to the camera and he starts talking about like that. And your dad says to me, he goes, "Oh, he really knows his stuff." So we're walking away after the segment's over. We get the microphone back. I turn to Mike and I go, "Mike, you should take that home with you. That's the most valuable thing you're going to take home today from the show. Is that Harlan Berk thinks you know your stuff." So that, and I know Mike has spent untold number of years really passionately thinking about it. So, Mike, you're like, I'm gonna put you in a scenario. You're walking along the Bourse floor, and you walk up to some tables of ancient coins. Like, what is going through your head at this point? Are you still overwhelmed?
Overwhelmed. Well, I mean, when you take my experience of about a year, right? I still am such a newbie to it that there are whole parts of it that I still really don't know about. So for me, I'm looking for things that I either recognize, or I'm looking for things that I have been taught to look for. I'm trying as hard as I can to identify probably the major ones, so it's like, your shekels of tire and stuff like that. Aaron did a piece with me a couple of weeks ago where he decided that he was going to put different coins in front of me and see what I could tell him about them. And one of them happened to be a shekel of tire, and I couldn't even get it. So it's like, I'm not going to get caught on that. I'm not going to get busted on that one again. That was the first coin that we went over. So, it's one of those things where I'm super patient with myself. And as long as Aaron thinks that I'm doing okay as far as coming along, which I know he does, I'm not going to be intimidated by it. And I'm just gonna try and soak it in.
Yeah, and just to give a little background on the podcast, so Mike came to work for us, God, what was it, 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
So, and Mike has been doing a podcast with Matt Dinger for 12 years.
13
years. So I knew he had that experience of doing podcasts, and I had always kind of wanted to do a podcast. And so I talked to him one of the first days and said, we should do something together at some point on ancient coins. But we needed to flush out how we wanted to go about that. And, I'd been told, oh, you should write a book. People were telling me, like my dad did the 100 Greatest Ancient Coin book. He's actually working on volume 3 now of ancient coin. The volume 2 actually is out of print now, if you can believe that. So he's working on volume 3. And I thought about doing one on collecting. And then I was saying to myself, you know what? A podcast is going to be a lot more dynamic, and I can change it and I can continue to do it. And once I do it in print, it's stuck there. That's it. Where with the podcast, I can continually make changes and updates. And so our formula and the way we kind of do the podcast is we have we introduce ourselves, and then I go into talking about auctions that are going to be coming up. So talking about auctions in Europe or in the United States, and bringing up a specific couple lots to give people get people familiar with other auction houses around the world and highlights of those auctions, so we can then talk about individually those coins and give a little bit of history about them. And then we go into a sometimes we have what's called the doofus purchase, which is kind of like somebody way overpaid for a coin to kind of teach people what not to do possibly, and why that was, a bad
Why
purchase.
it was unwise.
Yeah. And so a lot of people do love it. Some people think that, they don't want to be the doofus guy, but it's really the whole point of one of the biggest reasons for doing the podcast was to teach people about ancient coins, because I saw a lot of people buying ancient coins improperly. And like you said, there are people out there who can sell anything at any price. And so I felt like a lot of that was happening on the negative side. And so it was really important to me to start putting out information to new clients. And so I wanted it to be kind of like for beginners, but I also wanted to still be able to reach out to the advanced collectors as well. So by talking about current auctions, we kind of hit the advanced collector because they know quite a bit. And some collectors like Mike Martz, they know more than I do about a certain area because that's what they focused on. And so then we get into the educational part of the podcast, and we pick out some subject, and I do that. And then after that, sometimes we've had little games like Mike mentioned, like who's the, I'll have like a image of a coin and he has to guess who it is. So to get clients familiar with what ancient coins look like. And so all of this is based on the fact that Mike doesn't know anything and I'm supposed to be teaching him about ancient coins. And so he is kind of hitting it from the novice side, like a lot of our listeners and watchers are. And then still I can hit the advanced side as well. So that's kind of the whole premise of the show.
Well, yeah, and then we kind of wrap it up with a little pearl of wisdom also, something to make you a better collector.
Correct.
Well, to me, like the great thing about it is, and I've kind of, when we've published our own content about ancients, I allow our writers to like go as deep into something as they want to, because I think like the Celator was a really great publication when it was going on, and writers actually wanted their material in there. It wasn't really a profitable enterprise for anybody, except for the profit of actually growing the game, if you will. And I felt like, with that being gone, that I just wanted to provide the platform. If somebody wanted to come to our site and we have like really good material on it, then that's great. And if we had some introductory material, that was great too. Because I really think with collecting, it's really about like, I think, although I think the Red Book is the most important book in all of numismatics, at least in this country, because it sets like a standard for how to see things. I think the quicker a collector is able to break the bonds of the shackles, if you will, of the Red Book and understand that, like that organizes things so that you can use that organizational structure for whether you're collecting trade tokens or whether you're collecting the assay metals or German marks or Greek coins or whatever. Like now you kind of understand how numismatists may organize something, but go on and explore the world and do it your own way, because not everyone's going to be Louis Eliasberg and have every coin ever struck. So the idea of using that book as your Bible to all things numismatics is very limiting. So I always look at like, well, what is the on-ramp for other areas? And with ancient coins, it is, frankly, it's intimidating and daunting. And the first thing that kind of made me feel like, I can kind of start to figure this out was a friend of mine had a great collections of as grave coinage from Rome. And he did a really interesting presentation on it locally at one of our coin clubs. And the thing I was blown away by it is like, I had seen like Carthaginian coins from the same period, and I'd seen Greek coins from the same period. And when you kind of compare them side by side, and you think about the great Roman Empire, like Rome must have been just a total backwater at this period of time when you consider that they had basically these like these huge paperweights as coins.
Right.
And so it just started to make me think, it's like, well, if I could think of that and conceptualize the ancient world in such a way, then clearly like I can start to figure out other things.
Sure.
And that was like really the beginning of, you know, like my journey. But I'm sure if you did the same quiz to me, what you've done to Mike, if I haven't done a coin illustration on a certain thing or published an article on a certain topic, I'd be completely at a loss.
Right.
Mike, you should do the same. You should do the same quiz.
Denominations, and some of the denominations between periods can have the same name but be a completely different coin. So there's so many nuances.
Well, and everything is so different too. I mean, you have, you know, one of the things that really stood out of our last episode was, you know, here you have an emperor who was emperor for a year, and then you have one that was an emperor for 3 years, and the guy who followed him was 6 months. And so, you know, stuff is changing all the time, and because it's changing all the time, that makes it seem like a lot more time is passing than actually is.
Right. Right.
Yeah, Mike, have you ever done the game on Aaron where you pick the coins to see if you can stump the expert? Have you tried that?
Well, I do that every day at work, you know, so it's like, here, Aaron, what is this? You know, what is this? I don't think I'd want to do that, mostly because he's just too good. But I also, if anybody knows me and my penchant for games, you have to know that there are going to be something coming somewhere.
Right. Right. Look, and I'm not perfect either. You know, I always admit that on the podcast, because I'll get done with the podcast and somebody will say, oh, you were wrong about this or whatever. And we don't edit any of the show. The only time we've ever edited, we've had my dad on once, we had David Hendon on once for interviews. And so we had to cut them in. But really, when we start the show, we just tape it. And as soon as it's done, Mike sends it to me and I post it. There's no editing. So it's really almost like, it's almost live in a sense, because we don't make any changes to it and fix anything unless it's glaring like a huge mistake. And in the beginning we had some problems because Mike and I were getting used to each other as well. So
sure.
I would be talking about something and I couldn't see his screen and he'd have something up that, you know, that I wasn't talking about yet, or vice versa.
Right.
Now we've got a really good system.
Yeah, now we got it tight.
It works. So so there, you know, there's little nuances, and we just finished our 27th episode, so we've got a pretty good track record of doing them, and so it's been a learning experience, but it's been fun, you know, as well. And also it teaches me, because I have to go back and refresh myself on certain areas before I go into the podcast. And so it's always good for me, and I always learn something new every time I do that. So, because a lot of times if I'm looking up coins for a client, representing them in an auction, or I'm writing up a coin in our sale, or I'm trying to sell a coin, I'll go and research it and figure out everything I need to know about that coin if I don't know anything. And but if I never have had that coin, you know, or that area, then maybe I don't focus on it as much. And so as a dealer, as soon as you start to get material in those areas, then you learn everything about it. So and so by doing the podcast, sometimes I hit areas that I haven't hit before, and so then I have got to, you know, brush up a little bit, or maybe I'll go deeper into a subject I hadn't really done before. So and so it's good for me too, as a dealer, because I'm learning as well while doing these podcasts. So it's rewarding in that way.
Hey, can I ask you guys, can we talk about a topic that you brought up in one of your recent episodes?
Yeah.
I kind of want to know a little bit more, if you will, because you gave a really thorough and great breakdown of the controversy surrounding the gold Einmar, the Roman numismatics was involved in. It's one of the things that like always, it's something I'm always kind of aware of, is that knowledgeable dealers, it's their business, because they're really like the thing that they're actually offering to a collector is like basically very esoteric information. Okay, so you would go to Dave Akers if you're collecting gold coins, because you would assume that Dave Akers' research, you know, in the 1970s and 80s in the gold coins meant that you would have the upper hand on certain types of information when you're making your purchase. And I would have to think, when it comes to like the great rarities of ancient coins that like you, your father would have seen these coins, would probably have notes on things. You probably lot viewed this material before. It's all in that head, right? But my working theory is that, like, going into any major discovery or sale or anything, that if it's something that's an important property, that you guys have an insight, whether you're playing on that, you have a collector for that coin, or whether you're in the market for it at the time, you still have an insight, an opinion or something. And I also understand some of these opinions are not publishable, printable, conveyable to the public, because part of it's like some of it's on the gossipy side, right? Some of it may not be verifiable. You certainly don't want to like be responsible for any sort of tortious interference or any of that. So there's a business reason, there's a legal reason, there's also a personal reason, so there's information that a dealer will know that he will not convey, and there's like I said, and there's a reason. You recently handled one, a hold example. We had this great video of you opening it when it came to your office. So clearly you have a sophisticated collector base who may be in the market for a coin like that.
Right.
Clearly, like, you knew the existence of this coin.
Mm-hmm.
How much of this controversy did you have an inkling about, or were you a major player on, perhaps maybe a major player on a coin like this, but then this comes out and you're shocked and chagrined by it? It just doesn't seem like a gold Eidmar with a made up pedigree shows up out of nowhere. And the son of like one of the most sophisticated ancient coin dealers who's been in the industry for, like, you're talking about decades and decades, just knows that it just popped out of nowhere. I mean,
Yeah.
Seems like an interesting situation at this point.
Yeah. So first off, yes, I knew about when Roma sold the gold Eidmar in 2020. I was the underbidder on the coin, and at the time, I took a lot of the pedigree with a grain of salt on some level, because I was being told by several collectors that were offered the coin 5 years earlier that there was no pedigree offered. And so, but my client, who I was representing, the pedigree wasn't as important, and so as the coin itself. And so, in hindsight, I'm glad we didn't buy it. But it's also ironic because that coin sold for 4.2 million, and if we wouldn't have bid, it probably would have sold for 3 million, because we bid it. When we got into the bidding, we brought an extra £1 million hammer when we were bidding, and so that drew the hold one, which was on display at the British Museum since 2010, off display, and who knows if the client would have taken it off display if it didn't sell for 4 million. And so, ironically, then we're able to buy that coin for 2.2 million pounds, Swiss francs hammer. And so it's about 2.5, 2.6 million all in, something like that in dollars. And that one has a pedigree going back to the 30s. And so I knew about that hold one because my dad actually bought it for Barry Fierstein, which is a collector way back when, in 2001 or 2002. And he paid 120,000 Swiss francs for it back then. Then in 2004, Barry Fierstein sold his collection through NAC, and it brought 430, something like that. And now the client got over $2 million. So everything, I was involved with both scenarios on the public buying side of things. The one thing I have to say, and I like Richard Beal at Roma very much, and so I have to toe the line a little bit as well. But the one thing I can say is you never lie about pedigrees. That's a big no-no in the industry, and I'm not afraid to say it. And most of the dealers in our industry in ancient coins feel the same way. Anybody who's ever gone to jail, they've gone to jail historically for faking pedigrees. That's just something you just do not do. So
let's talk about that real quick to dissect it for people so they understand.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the need for a pedigree on a coin like that and a pedigree for like an 1804 dollar? The deal is that we don't have cultural property laws or export laws or anything like that about any U.S. coin. So it doesn't matter if something comes out of somebody's antique cabinet they got at a flea market and it's a super rare US coin. There's no restriction that exists that prohibits someone from trading it. On a coin like this is completely falls in a different category, right?
Right. So and really, and I've made this point on the podcast, is that there are no laws that say you can't own ancient coins. It's a matter of what can flow in and out of countries freely. And so most source countries, that's illegal to export out of those source countries, except for England and Israel. Those are the two countries that you can actually export out of. You can also export out of Germany, but you have to have a 20-year pedigree to be able to do so, to get export papers. So really what it comes down to is kind of a passport for ancient coins and what can move in and out of countries. If you have a pre-1970 pedigree, that means museum institutions can purchase. It was part of the UNESCO treaty that was signed back then to keep museums and institutions from buying looted material after 1970. And so a lot of this material that comes up for auction that's pre-1970 pedigree brings sometimes 2, 3, 10 times what the coin is worth, because the pedigree itself is worth as much as the coin can be in some cases. It definitely will add 30 to 50% to the value or more, like I just mentioned. And so on a coin like this, to get somebody to spend millions of dollars, you're going to pull more people into the fold if you have a pedigree before 1970 than if you didn't, because there are collectors now in the upper 1% and 2% collecting base that will only buy pre-1970 pedigree coins. So in fact, the Sheikh of Qatar, who was buying in 2012, 2011, 2010 through 2012, he was only buying pre-1970 pedigree coins. And so there was a problem with a gentleman who was faking pedigrees in New York for a sale, and they were making up pedigrees just for the sheikh. And so, a lot of times greed plays into that. And so you want to try to get clients that normally wouldn't buy a coin like that, and they will only do it if it has a pedigree. And so on a coin like this, he supposedly paid for a pedigree. He's admitted to that, and there's going to be some major consequences from that. And because of that, the coin, they probably, my guess is, because this is all hearsay at this point, the court case isn't finished yet, but the owner of the coin, who was an American, nobody knows who it was, gave up the coin to New York, even though it was out of state, probably because New York had information about when and where the coin was looted from, which supposedly was Greece, which makes sense because Brutus was actually issuing coins in not only Greece, but Turkey at the time. So it could have very well been Turkey, but they may have had information that went back to Greece. And so based on that, they can say, well, it was recently looted. And so now, not only does it have a tainted pedigree, but now we know when it came out, and it's going to go back to Greece at this point.
So essentially, in that case, basically, like, it becomes maybe the property of the state. It's like sort of a cultural artifact, and it gets tied up. So without this passport, like, these coins are subject to seizure, especially if they're rare.
Yeah, it depends on, for us, our laws, it has to do with what can come in and out through customs. And so the laws that are created is just based on what customs and how customs looks at certain things. So if there's a restriction on Italy, it's going to be between, the restrictions are going to be between a certain date. And so if those coins come in without a pedigree before that restriction date, then it could be seized at that point. And so when we do importing in from Europe on any auction, we have to make sure that our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. And as long as you tell the truth about everything, there's usually never a problem. And so my dad has a great line that if you don't lie, you don't have to remember what you said. So and
sound advice.
And that's sound advice. And that's kind of how we've tried to always run our business. And so nobody's perfect, but I feel like that helps out quite a bit in that regard. And there's coins that come to market all the time that you're like, well, that has no pedigree and it's $1 million coin and it must be recently looted, but there's no proof of it anywhere. And so it's better never to make up a pedigree on something and you don't know one way or the other when the coin came out. The auction house will say, oh, it came from an old family or whatever, but it's, there's no actual physical proof of that. And so you really have to, one thing I always do with my clients is I always make sure that whatever we're bidding on, that we make sure that we're not going to have a problem down the road. And like I said, luckily with the gold Eidmar, we didn't buy it because that would have been a problem. But in hindsight now, my client now owns the only one in private hand. It has a hole in it, yes, but it's the only gold Eidmar that's available in the market because the other two now are going to be stuck in museums and they're never going to come out. And so maybe that's increased the value of his. I would think so. It worked out for me and my client, but it didn't work out for the buyer and for Roma.
Well, can I ask you a question about the market then? So obviously, this gold, the Roma Eidmar sells for a record price, and a coin like that gets picked up by all sorts of major news wires, and you see like Daily Mail and maybe CNN, other places might have had a thing on it, right? So that obviously has to have a positive impact on the ancient coin collecting market and the ability for people to become interested in it, reach out and try to get involved or buy coins or think that ancient coins are all valuable or whatever. But then to turn around and have the situation where the coin gets seized and there's like this allegation of like illegal activity, that has to then have a negative impact on the market and make people feel like, well, I don't know if I want to buy that because maybe they're all illegal to own. I mean, like, what was this in your opinion, just like spitballing it here, is it a net positive that it sold for 4.6 million and then was called back? Or is it a net negative because this high profile coin that set a record price is now considered, that sale is considered dubious and specious in a way?
I think both. I think that the price itself is, and the sale itself happened in 2020, and that's always going to be history made, and that's a positive for the coin industry, for the ancient coin industry. The negative side, obviously, is that gentleman, that Roma, faked a pedigree when they shouldn't have done that, and so that actually tainted the coin. And so if they wouldn't have lied about that, they probably would have been fine ultimately. And so I think historically we've had these problems come up before and have hit the press all over. And it's bad in the beginning, and because it gives a negative view of the coin industry, and it gets the archaeologists who are constantly trying to fight against people collecting anything to have a reason to vilify all of us. But I can say that just from history that the ancient coin market has survived, and I believe it'll survive this quite well. In fact, Roma had their mail bid sale like a couple weeks after this whole stuff came out, and their sale still did gangbusters. So, and I had clients that were like, should I still bid? And I said, yeah, but let's just bid on things that have pedigrees, that are known pedigrees, just to be safe. And I still spend close to $100,000 for clients in their sale. And people ask me, did you bid? And I'm like, yeah, I bid. I still supported them because there's, coins are still coins and, and the collectors are still collectors. And so I think that, will Roma survive this? I think they will. But that's yet to be seen. And in general, I've seen prices still very, very, very strong. NAC is about to come. Their sales now up online. I'm going to actually be traveling to Zurich for the auction, and there's some major coins in that sale that could break the record for the gold Eidmar. Who knows? It's hard to say. But I expect that sale to do, amazing business. I know Heritage is getting ready to sell the Hunt Specimen Eidmar again, which we actually own. This is give you an idea of history again, right? So The Hunt specimen silver Eidmar Daenerys, which represents the assassination of Julius Caesar. That's what we're talking about, this gold one. But there's about 80 to 100 in silver. And we own that coin, that Hunt specimen coin. We paid $100,000 for it in something like 2008, and it wasn't a good time in the ancient coin market at all. We held that coin, actually published it in our catalog, didn't sell it. We ended up selling it a year later for 112 or 113,000. So we made 13 grand. And then a number of years later, Herod sold it and it brought $500,000. And so that was a crazy price at the time. Nobody was getting prices like that. It was totally two people fighting it out in an auction. But I know all the history of that coin because we actually owned it. And in fact, our ancient coin database, when we bring up when we create a new record, it's the image of that coin. That was our original, because that's when we were building our databases out. So it's really interesting to see how the ancient coin market has gone, and knowing all the history of these coins. And my dad's owned a lot of these coins, and so he'll tell me, like, I'm getting ready to bid on a coin that might bring $2 or $3 million in the NAC sale, and my dad could have bought the coin in the 70s for 100 grand. So it's just interesting, and to be able to give that information to collectors is fun.
Yeah, talking about that silver Eidmar, just for the viewers to a little context on that. The Hunt is Nelson Bunker Hunt. He was the Texas billionaire who tried to corner the silver market in the late 70s and early 80s. He lost a fortune on it. He still died rich, not quite as rich, but he was a ancient coin collector par excellence. He had just an amazing collection of coins that he assembled through his life. So that is a very strong pedigree. So Mike, I wanted to put you up for a few minutes and ask you directly a question. So I want you to give your rundown, if you will, for what you would recommend people do if they want to follow your journey, have their own version of your journey, and get into ancient coins from like other areas of numismatics. Like, what information that they have from collecting modern coins or slabbed coins or what have you on the American side, what information is transferable into ancient coins, and what sort of like would you recommend they do in the first 3 to 6 months to kind of get their feet wet in this?
So there are several things that I would consider to be just absolutely canon, right, between collecting coins, no matter which ones you're collecting, be they ancient or US and modern. One is, do your research. Buy the coin or buy the book before you buy the coin. Research what you're looking at. Have an idea. It's okay when you first start out to buy things just to buy them, because they interest you, because you want to look at them. But at some point, you have to start trying to figure out what you have and where it comes from, and where it fits into the market. I think that that's where a lot of people make their early mistakes, and it's okay. You're going to learn from those mistakes. That's kind of the tuition you're going to pay. But the biggest thing, I think, is just that knowledge is the key. That the person who knows the most at the end usually wins. And it's just as true for ancient coins as it is for US. The things that appeal to ancient coin collectors very much are the same things that US collectors look for. They look for good specimens in nice shape, something that has historical significance, or describes an area or a period of time that they find romantic. And so it's trying to figure out what the fakes are, and most importantly, I think, is finding somebody who you can rely on and you can trust to just kind of guide you and help you a bit. You're going to learn a lot from books, but it's always good to have somebody to bounce an idea off of. Somebody to say, am I getting this right? Is this really what you're talking about when you say fine style? Is this is this the right era for, this type of coin? Just things like that.
Well, a lot of people tend to be, self-conscious, like when you're having a hobby, something you're trying to avoid is to feel bad about yourself, right? So how do you overcome that feeling of maybe like inadequacy about like what or maybe what you can afford when you're dealing with something like this? Because I mean, obviously, Aaron's a super nice guy. I'm pretty sure I can tell you from experience, like my son is showing a budding interest in ancient coins, and he put together a really nice assemblage of pieces, and he I'm sure he didn't charge me the market rate for it. He let me buy it for him. And I'm sure, like, you put up with a lot of new collectors like in the industry, and I say put up with, you're also putting up with a lot of advanced collectors because everybody puts their own kind of like BS forward sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, how do you overcome that feeling of like, not feeling like you know what you should know when you're exploring a new area in the hobby, and how would you recommend people overcome maybe that fear?
Well, I will say the humility really helps. In my particular case, I come from an area that I actually know quite a bit about. And so to absolutely start over from scratch, and more importantly, to do it on tape in front of the world, I think that takes a little bit of extra, but I don't mind. And it's never been an issue for me because I think of myself as an educator. I think of myself as somebody who is really trying to push knowledge. And I'm doing it from the negative side, right? I'm pulling it from the vacuum. I'm trying to show people that it's okay to be unsure, that it's okay to still be learning, that nobody knows everything, that people start out sometimes with no information, and that's okay, and that if as long as you are passionate about it and that you keep going at it, that and as long as you look for good information, because the information is really key, that there's a lot to learn. And I think that most collectors are really, really they're understanding of that in other people, and they tend to nurture those people a little bit better, and they'll help them out as much as they can. I think everybody likes to think that they've helped somebody along in their journey. So being at the bottom end of the spectrum, if that's what you want to call it, it's really not a bad place to be. It's really quite a nice, warm place where there's a lot of people to help you and a lot of people that have advice.
How about you, Aaron? I mean, I guess the maybe a one working theory is that a coin dealer probably makes more money off of a beginner collector than somebody who doesn't collect coins at all, right?
Typically when a new collector comes in and they want to buy something, I try to talk them out of it, honestly. And that's how I built a lot of good relationships with clients, because I feel like you shouldn't just run into this right away. I tell them, here's my dad's book. Sometimes I'll give them a free copy if depending on who they are. If it's a kid, I always give it to them. But I had one collector who I didn't sell anything to him for almost a year and a half. And every time he would come in, he'd say, "What about this coin?" And I'd say, "It was my coin." And I'd say, "No, it's a piece of crap. Don't buy that." And so now he's one of my better clients, and I've sold him hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of coins. But in the beginning, I didn't sell him anything because he wasn't ready. And so I have no problem telling a new collector to take their time and to really focus on what they want to do, because that first purchase will always be the worst one that they'll make, typically. And a lot of collectors come back to me like a couple years later and they say, "I need to get rid of that coin." Some say, "Well, it was my first coin, so I'll keep it, so it has sentimental value." And some people say, "Well, it's not even the area I'm collecting anymore," because they realize that wasn't where they were going to go. And just to get back on the podcast a little bit, one thing that Mike and I always wanted to do was to not make it feel like an infomercial about our company. And so that was always a tough balance for us. And so I had a collector recently ask us, like, "Why don't you do more pricing and show off more coins in your buy or bid sales?" And I will promote the sales when they come out and talk about them like I would any other news portion of that part of the podcast, but I don't want to focus too much on my company because I do want to make sure that I'm being neutral in what I'm putting out there. And the whole point of it was to help the new collector and to give them the tools, whether they use us as a company or me as a dealer or another dealer, to give them the tools to be able to feel comfortable buying ancient coins. And that was the whole point of the premise of the show to begin with. So I feel like we've done that with new collectors, teaching them on what to do and what not to do. And I think that we've given something to the advanced collector who maybe doesn't know a certain area. And so then they learn about something they didn't know anything about.
Well, I think it's a great premise. I mean, when we set out to do our podcast, I mean, kind of my guiding thought was that, coins are interesting things. And I say coins, but I really mean every bit of it. And they're collected by interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
And in some respects, like the hobby of numismatics, I mean, the objects we collect kind of become the totem that allows us to have these like great relationships and stories. I mean, I can't tell you how many of my fondest memories about this industry don't involve me buying or selling a coin or working on something. It's like a conversation after dinner, after a show or something, or going somewhere with somebody, going on vacation with somebody, lifelong friendships. I mean, in reality, the community is a subculture we're all part of.
Right.
And then the other thing I always thought, since I have the ability to publish and create things, because that's kind of what we do, why don't I do the things that I want to consume? Like if I was like the consumer. And so when I was thinking about podcasting, I was like, well, I like the idea of like I imagine like Stacks in the 50s and 40s, where you had all the like top New York collectors like just hanging out like it was their clubhouse.
Right.
And I was just imagining like the kinds of conversations that were happening over the counter, right? And so I was like, well, like let's do those conversations and have that kind of experience. Imagine that experience. And what you guys have been doing, your podcast is very, very much in tune with like the thing I would be looking for in the market. It's like what I want to hear. I want to hear people talk about it. I want to hear like that interesting, fascinating conversation over the counter about something. And I think like you said, Mike is bringing in a perspective of someone trying to learn. Frankly, that's like most people are collecting coins. Like I said, one of my best friends is an ancient coin collector. I mean, he's on the board of trustees at the ANS, and he goes, oh, they picked me because they wanted a Southern cracker on the board. Like they wanted to represent diversity and represent the guy who didn't know anything. And it's just like even like a guy at that level like feel like, oh, he's still learning everything is that is an experience that's shared by many people. Like we can't all be David Hendon and spend 30 years in the Levant, like finding these amazing.
And also what's really cool about our podcast is Mike knows a lot. He knows everything about US coins and I don't. And so I'm kind of an idiot when it comes to US coins. And so so a lot of times I'll bring up specific things about US coins and the US market, and Mike can give that perspective. And so that's where he, even though he doesn't know anything about ancient coins, he can give a perspective from the US coin market. And so that's helpful in bringing the two closer together and showing the differences between the two, which is really, really cool. And so it's a lot of fun to have Mike there for that reason alone. And also because we do have one advertiser now. We have a winery that wanted to advertise with us, but we don't like NGC or Heritage or any of these people where they don't pay us, right? So we can talk about the difference between slabbing ancient coins and not slabbing ancient coins. And I have a negative view about slabbing in some ways and a positive in other ways. And people always think like, oh, Aaron, you hate slabs. Well, no, I don't hate slabs, but I talk about the negative sides of it and what to look out for. And so I think that gives us an advantage over some of the news portals that don't want to step on NGC's toes because they're advertisers. And so I think that gives us a great advantage to be able to speak candidly about certain things, but not to like attack them, because that's not really my goal. My goal is not to attack, it's to educate. And so I think that gives us a unique perspective and a good place to be with our podcast.
We can be critical without being beholden to them.
Correct.
So Aaron, are you suggesting that perhaps the population report of the Athenian tetradrachm is not representative of the total overall market?
Correct. Especially when one brings $50,000, which is what happened.
Yeah.
You give it 2,000 more years of time, folks, and then I think it'll probably.
Oh God, so funny, so funny. Yeah, the ignorance that can be out there, and there's ignorance in anything, right? You know, if you just don't know, you shouldn't be putting your money into it until you really know. And I always say to people, you like, if you don't want to use me as a dealer or my company as a dealer, go find a dealer that's legit and work with them, especially if you're spending real money, and make sure that that dealer is accountable for mistakes that happen as well. Because we talked about that on the podcast all the time, is that you always know, whether it's in the coin business or in life, that when the worst things happen, you really see the people's personalities and what they are willing to do or not do at that point. And so so having a good dealer standing behind their product and making sure that they're there to fight for you when a problem occurs. If you're sitting there just screwing all your clients on what you sell them, then you're not going to be very happy when you get those coins back. And so I want to make sure that every collection that I get back from collectors that now want to sell, that I'm proud to resell them and find homes and hopefully do well for the client. And if I didn't screw them, then it's going to be fine in that regard. So but it's amazing to me when I see these like multimillionaires spend money in places they should not be spending money in.
No, absolutely. They want trophies. They don't really care what kind of trophy it is.
But it's not a good trophy.
Right. Well, guys, I appreciate like you guys taking the time out to come on, and again, good luck on what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job. It's amazing. You're almost at 30 episodes on this already, and that you're in for it for the long haul. You know, a lot of people don't commit the time and effort to do it for the long haul. So I'm glad that you're doing it. It's a great program. I'm happy to help support it and get people aware of it. We'll continue to repost them and on CoinWeek. In fact, I think we need to catch up. I think we're behind several episodes, but I do appreciate you talking to me about it and letting me kind of experience it a little bit, like on the side here. And you guys are welcome back on anytime you want. It'd actually be a hoot for me, Aaron, to get you and your sister on together one time.
That would be fun.
But good luck, best of luck, and look forward to the next episode.
And thank you.
Thanks, Charles,
for everything you do. I mean, you put out great content. CoinWeek is wonderful, and I always use CoinWeek all the time when promoting the industry and showing people where to get good content. And so I really appreciate what you've done with CoinWeek since you've been there. And I don't think we mentioned it, but if you want to find our podcast, it's the Ancient Coin Podcast with Aaron Berk. You can find it. All the episodes are on YouTube. And you can go to our website, and we have a tile on our homepage that will link you to all of them as well.
Yeah, and we'll put a link in the description here too. All right, thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Take care.